Hello and welcome. You are listening to Topicia Inner Clarity. Today we're exploring a very specific, very pervasive feeling. It's that question, why have you always felt different? Why does it feel like everyone else received a manual for being human that you just never got?
And we're going to be looking at this through the lens of psychology, specifically Carl Jung's work, to understand that friction between the collective and the individual.
And the headline here, the main takeaway, is that this feeling of being an outsider, it isn't a flaw. It's not a mistake.
Not at all. The research suggests it's actually a necessary biological and spiritual function. It's a signal of what Jung called individuation.
So let's settle in. We have a lot to cover.
We do.
I want to start with the sensation itself. Because before we get into the heavy theory or the Jungian concepts, we need to ground this in the actual lived experience.
The phenomenology of it, yes.
When you look at the research, at the personal accounts, there's this recurring description of very specific, almost physical feeling. It's often described as watching life through a sheet of glass.
The glass wall phenomenon.
Right. Let's just paint that picture for a moment. You're at a party, maybe a work event you have to be at.
Sure.
You're holding a drink, you're nodding, you're even smiling at the right times. But inside, you feel completely separate.
You're physically present, but existentially absent. You're watching the room, but you're not of the room.
And that feeling, for a lot of people, I think it triggers a really harsh internal monologue.
Why is this so hard for me when everyone else seems to be having a great time?
Yes. We look around and we see people laughing, chatting about, the weather or sports, and it looks so seamless for them.
It looks effortless.
So we conclude, I must be broken. We pathologize it. We call it social anxiety or awkwardness, or we just label ourselves antisocial.
We treat it as a defect. But this is where the research gets really fascinating, because the source material suggests this sensation, this feeling of being maybe half a second out of sync with the world.
Yeah.
It isn't about social anxiety in the clinical sense. It is a discrepancy in processing.
The research uses a term that I really love, the frequency gap.
Yes. It's a powerful metaphor.
Do you unpack that for us? Because it sounds a bit like radio engineering, not psychology.
Well, think of it this way. Most social interaction, the kind that happens at parties or, around the water cooler, it operates on a specific bandwidth. Let's call it AM radio. It's designed for range, not for fidelity. It's efficient. How are you? Good. Crazy weather we're having. Did you see the game? It keeps the social lubricant flowing.
It connects the herd.
It's safe. It's predictable.
Very safe.
But the research suggests that the outsider personality type, which is often linked to high sensitivity or high cognitive processing, is naturally broadcasting on a different frequency.
FM radio.
Maybe FM, maybe satellite. They're transmitting high-fidelity data, emotional nuance, subtext, philosophical questions, existential dread.
All the fun stuff.
All the fun stuff on a channel that the AM receivers they just can't pick it up. They're not built for it.
So it's not that the outsider is bad at communicating. It's that they are transmitting a signal that the receiver isn't equipped to decode.
Precisely. And this leads to that exhaustion we've read so much about in the sources. That specific kind of tired.
Oh, the post-socializing coma. Where you need to just lie in a dark room for 3 hours because you talked about traffic for 20 minutes.
That's the one. But think about why that happens. It's not just boredom. The research points to the mechanism of masking.
Right.
If you're an FM transmitter in an AM world, to be understood, you have to manually. You have to downgrade your own signal. You have to throttle your own intelligence, your own intuition, just to fit the protocol.
That sounds like a phenomenal amount of work.
It is a massive caloric expenditure. You are constantly translating yourself into a simpler language in real time. And you're doing this while suppressing all the other data you're picking up.
What kind of data?
Well, this is the other marker of the outsider found in the research. Hyperperception. You walk into that meeting room, everyone's laughing, eating donuts, it all seems fine on the surface. But you, the outsider, you immediately sense the undercurrents.
You feel the vibe.
You feel more than the vibe. You sense that Bob and Karen are in a fight even though they're smiling at each other. You feel the tension in your manager's jaw. You notice the hum of the fluorescent light is slightly off.
You're processing the reality of the room.
While everyone else is just surfing the surface of the room.
Which makes you look distracted.
Yeah.
Or aloof.
I'm judgmental.
I've definitely been accused of that.
Why are you so quiet? You look so intense. And inside, I'm thinking, I'm not intense. I'm just overwhelmed by the fact that you're all lying to each other right now and nobody is saying it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that is the crux of it. The outsider sees the shadow. They see the things we're not supposed to see. And the research is pretty clear that this dynamic usually starts very, very early.
Let's talk about the childhood aspect. Because the image of the watcher on the playground, that really hit home for me when I was reading through the material.
It's a poignant image, isn't it?
Yeah.
The source material describes the child who doesn't quite know how to enter the scrum.
Yeah.
You see other kids just playing. They run, they scream, they merge into a group. It's seamless.
They have the manual.
They are the manual. They're in a state of what Jung would call unconscious participation. But the outsider child, they're standing at the edge of the blacktop.
Observing the dynamics. Okay, if I smile now, they seem to accept me. If I run that way, I get chased. They are studying human behavior like a little anthropologist.
That sounds incredibly lonely for a 6-year-old.
It is lonely. But here is the critical pivot point the research highlights. That child interprets their observation mode as a defect. They think, I am not participating because I am broken.
I am shy. I'm weird. There's something wrong with me.
Right. And often the environment reinforces this. Parents or teachers, usually well-meaning, they try to fix it.
Go play. Why don't you join in? Don't be so sensitive.
And so the child learns the most dangerous lesson of their life. My natural state is wrong. To survive, I must perform.
And there it is. The birth of the mask.
There it is, the construction of a false self that is designed to please the herd. And the tragedy, really, is that usually these kids are very, very good at it.
Because they're smart.
They're smart enough to build a perfect mask, so they become the good student or the easy child.
The chameleon.
They become chameleons. But inside, that glass wall just gets thicker and thicker. They are loved for their performance, not for their reality.
Okay, so we have this setup. High sensitivity, high intelligence, and early feeling of difference, which leads to this really sophisticated mask. Most people live their whole lives right there. They just polish the mask until they die.
Many do. It's comfortable, it's safe, it's predictable.
But we promised to deep dive into why this happens. And this is where we have to bring in the heavyweight champion of the unconscious, Carl Jung.
We do. To understand any of this, we have to tackle his central concept, individuation.
It's a big word. Break it down for us. What does it actually mean in this context?
Simply put, individuation is the process of peeling off that mask we just talked about. It is the agonizing, slow process of becoming who you actually are.
Right.
Distinct from who your parents, your culture, or your friends want you to be.
Becoming who you are. It sounds a bit like a motivational poster.
Yeah.
You know, just be yourself.
It does, doesn't it? The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. It sounds lovely, but when you actually read Jung's work on this, especially in the development of personality, he isn't talking about self-care or finding a new hobby.
No.
He describes it as a war. He calls it an act of high courage flung in the face of life.
Why courage? What's so scary about being yourself?
Because of the herd instinct. We have to remember, we are evolved primates. For millions of years, survival meant one thing: belonging to the tribe.
If you got kicked out of the tribe.
You didn't find yourself. You died. You got eaten by a leopard.
So the fear of being an outsider isn't just social anxiety. On a deep primal level, it's a death threat.
Biologically, yes. Your nervous system treats social rejection as a mortal threat. So when Jung says you have to separate from the collective psychology, from the herd, he is asking you to override your deepest survival instincts.
He's asking you to walk out of the village alone into the dark forest.
Yes. And that is why he says convention, just doing what everyone else does, is a shield.
A shield against what?
Jung calls it the god of terror. He doesn't mean a monster hiding in the closet. He means the sheer, overwhelming chaos of the unknown.
Right.
Think about it. If you follow the script, go to school, get the job, marry the person, buy the house, you don't have to make any real existential choices. The path is laid out for you. You are safe from the terror of infinite possibility.
Choice paralysis on a cosmic scale.
Exactly. Convention protects you from having to face the void, but the outsider, for some reason, the shield doesn't work for them. The script doesn't fit. They try to put on the uniform of the corporate professional or the happy suburbanite, and it burns their skin.
They can't use the shield.
They can't. So they are forced to face the god of terror. They are forced to write their own life.
which is terrifying.
It is, but, and this is the key insight from the deep dive, that terror is the only thing that grows a soul.
That's an interesting phrase. Are we implying that people who just follow the herd, they don't have souls?
Jung would say they have unconscious souls. They are part of the mass mind. They believe what the news tells them to believe. They value what their neighbors value. They are, in a sense, sleeping. The outsider, by virtue of their pain, by virtue of their isolation, is forced to wake up.
So the isolation it's a crucible.
It's a pressure cooker. You are stewing in your own juices until you condense into a solid individual. You can't be a solid person if you are liquid, constantly taking the shape of whatever container you're in.
And most of us are liquid. We pour ourselves into a workplace, we take that shape. We pour ourselves into a relationship, we take that shape.
Correct. Individuation is the process of becoming solid. But the price of becoming solid is that you no longer fit neatly in the container.
This explains so much about the hostility we sometimes feel. I want to touch on that because it's one thing to feel different. It's another thing entirely when people seem almost angry at you for being different. You're just sitting there living your life and people get annoyed.
Yes. The mirroring effect. This is where we get into the mechanics of the psyche. Jung mapped this out using archetypes, and the one that explains this hostility is the shadow.
The shadow. We hear this term a lot in pop psychology. Let's define it properly. It's the repository of everything we repress, right?
Correct. It's the bag we drag behind us. It holds everything that didn't fit into our persona, our social mask. So, anger, greed, sexuality, but also creativity, spontaneity, and freedom.
So how does this explain why Gary from accounting hates me?
Well, let's look at Gary. Let's assume Gary hates his job. Maybe he wanted to be a musician or a world traveler, but he was scared. He wanted the safety of the herd.
He chose convention.
So he took the accounting job, he followed the rules, he repressed his creative drive, he shoved that entire part of himself into his shadow.
Okay, so he suppressed his inner musician.
Then he meets you. And let's say you are living a creative life. You're taking risks, you're maybe a bit messy, but you're free. When Gary looks at you, he doesn't just see a person. He sees the part of himself he murdered.
And that makes him hate me.
It makes him resent you because you are a walking, talking reminder of his own cowardice. You are triggering his shadow. By simply existing, you are holding up a mirror to his unlived life.
So when the outsider feels rejected, it's not always because they did something wrong. It could be because they represent something the group is suppressed.
Exactly. You are the black sheep, and people think the black sheep is the bad one.
Yeah.
But in family systems theory, and certainly in Jungian analysis, the black sheep is often the most honest person in the room.
How so?
They are acting out the truth that the family is trying to hide. They are the release valve for the family's secrets.
And usually, you get punished for it.
Of course. Because the group wants to maintain the illusion of harmony, the black sheep disrupts that illusion.
That is such a powerful reframing. It turns the rejection into a form of validation in a twisted sort of way.
It helps you take it less personally. You realize, oh, they aren't reacting to me. They are reacting to what I represent in themselves.
I want to move to another archetype mentioned in the research because I think it applies to a lot of our listeners who feel like they have all this potential. The pure eternus.
The eternal youth, or the puella for women.
The Peter Pan syndrome.
It's often called that, yes. But Jung treats it with more nuance than just refusing to grow up. The pure is the archetype of potential. It's the person who flies high, who has brilliant ideas, who feels spiritual and special. But they struggle to land.
They struggle with the mundane. Paying bills, keeping a schedule, the day-to-day grind.
Right, and the research suggests that the outsider often falls into the pure trap because the real world feels so disappointing compared to their inner world.
Why would I land and take a boring job when I can stay in the stratosphere of my potential?
Precisely. Jung calls this the provisional life, doesn't he?
Yes, the provisional life. This is a haunting concept. It's the feeling that I am not really living yet. This job, this relationship, this town, it's just a placeholder. I'm waiting for the real thing to start.
I think I spent my entire 20s in that state.
Many, many people do. And the tragedy is you can spend 40 years in the waiting room of your own life refusing to sit down because you think your real name is about to be called.
That is terrifying.
It is. The pure feels different because they refuse to touch the ground. They float. And while floating feels like freedom, it's actually a prison because you can't build anything in the clouds.
So sometimes feeling different or special is actually a defense mechanism.
It can be. It can be a way to avoid the hard work of bringing your gift down to earth. The feeling of being an outsider can become a kind of ego trip. I'm too special for this ordinary world. He says the solution isn't to crush the youth or the dream. It's to integrate the sovereign or father, energy structure, discipline, responsibility.
You have to build a container.
You have to build a container for your difference. Otherwise, it just dissipates into the ether. You have to give your uniqueness a vehicle to actually exist in the world.
Precisely.
And this leads us perfectly to the next section, the call of vocation. Because if you have this unique structure, this unique personality, surely it's for a reason. It's not just random noise.
Jung was adamant about this. He didn't view vocation as just a career path. I think I'll be a dentist. He described it as an irrational law.
An irrational law.
Yes. In his collected works, he says true personality is always a vocation. He compares it to a demon. That's D-A-E-M-O-N, the Greek concept of an inner spirit whispering to you.
I love that image, a demon whispering to you. It makes it sound so urgent.
It is urgent. Jung says it acts like a law of God from which there is no escape. The conflict arises because this internal demon often demands things that go completely against the group's wishes.
The group says, be a doctor, be safe, make money.
And the demon says, paint, or travel, or speak the truth that will get you in trouble.
And the risk, the research says, of ignoring this voice is high.
Extremely high. Jung warns that the person with a vocation who tries to suppress it will fall into neurosis. He says the illness, the anxiety, the depression, the sense of wrongness is actually the soul screaming for alignment. It's the demon taking revenge for being ignored.
That explains the frequency mismatch we talked about earlier. If you're ignoring your demon to fit into the herd, you are essentially vibrating at the wrong frequency. You are out of tune with yourself.
Exactly. And this brings up the depth versus breadth issue found in the research. The outsider, because they are driven by this internal intensity, craves depth. They want one profound conversation that rips the soul open. They don't want 10 interactions about the weather.
I think we've all felt that at a cocktail party. You're standing there, holding a drink, talking about real estate or traffic, and you just want to scream. You want to ask, what are you afraid of? What do you love? What keeps you up at night?
Which you can't.
You can't, because that breaks the social contract.
And that is the small talk problem. The research frames it beautifully. It's not arrogance. It's not that the outsider thinks they are better than the people talking about traffic. It's a lack of nourishment.
Yes. For the outsider, service interaction requires energy, but provides no caloric intake for the soul.
Right.
They are starving in the middle of a feast.
And this connects to the misunderstood genius concept from the source material. It mentions that highly intelligent people often have to mask their intelligence to fit in. They dim their own light.
They do. They realize early on that their full processing speed, their full vocabulary, their full intensity, it overwhelms other people.
So they throttle down.
But imagine driving a Ferrari in first gear for your entire life.
It's going to damage the engine.
It's going to destroy the engine. And that is what masking does to the psyche.
So if we accept that this feeling of difference is real and that it's painful, and that it's driven by this biological and spiritual need for individuation, I have to ask the big question. What is the point? Why does nature produce these outsiders? Why not just have everyone be happy in the herd? Wouldn't that be more efficient?
It would be more stable, but it would be stagnant. This is the most hopeful part of the research. It suggests that the outsider has a specific evolutionary function. Society needs the outsider.
We're the mutation.
In a sense. Culture only evolves because someone stepped outside the campfire light and said, hey, I think there's something else out there. Jung mentions that the great liberating deeds of history never come from the mass. They only come from the leading personality.
The outsider introduces the new. They are the scouts for the species.
The scouts, I like that.
The herd stays in the safe valley where it's always been. The scout climbs the mountain. It's dangerous on the mountain. It's cold. You might fall. But the scout is the only one who can see where the fresh water is. They're the only one who can see the predator coming from a mile away.
So the friction is the point. The pain of being different is the cost of the ticket to be the scout.
Precisely. The pain is the training. You're being trained to stand alone so that you can see what the group cannot see. If you were comfortable in the group, you wouldn't be looking for anything else.
But standing alone is hard. It hurts. And the research makes a very important distinction here between loneliness and solitude. Can we parse that out? Because they feel so different.
This is a vital distinction for anyone listening who feels this way. Loneliness is the pain of being disconnected from others. It's a deficit. It's looking through that glass wall and wishing you were on the other side.
Right. It's craving the herd.
Solitude, however, is the glory of being connected to oneself. It's a sanctuary.
And the research suggests that the turning point for the outsider comes when they stop trying to force belonging and start embracing solitude.
Yes. When you are in the herd, your nervous system is constantly scanning. Do I fit in? Am I safe? Did I say the wrong thing? It's hypervigilance.
Constant monitoring.
Constant monitoring. In solitude, that stops. The research says that in solitude, the nervous system finally relaxes. You can hear your own thoughts. You can hear the demon.
So solitude is where you recharge so that you can actually offer something to the world.
Correct. You cannot bring a gift back to the village if you never leave the village to find it. The solitude is the journey into the forest to find the gift.
I love that. And there's another timeline aspect here that I found really comforting in the research, the concept of the late bloomer.
Oh, this is huge. Jung emphasizes the second half of life. He argues that the first half of life, roughly up to age 35 or 40, is about biology and society. It's about building the ego, finding a mate, getting a job, fitting in.
And the outsider often sucks at this.
They are terrible at it. They trip over all the hurdles. They fail at the normal markers of success.
They feel like they're falling behind.
Exactly. But Jung says the game changes in the second half. In the second half, the goal shifts from adaptation to meaning. From ego to self. This is where the outsider shines. They have been preparing for the second half their whole lives.
The research has a beautiful quote about this. The wine has fermented and begins to settle and clear.
It's a lovely image. The confusion, the struggle of the early years, that was fermentation. It was a chemical process. It was messy and bubbly and pungent. But in the second half of life, the clarity comes. The outsider often ages better, psychologically speaking, because they've already done the hard work of introspection that the conformist is only forced to do when they have a midlife crisis.
So if you're listening and you feel like you're behind, maybe you're just playing a longer game.
We're playing a game with a different set of rules entirely.
We've talked about the problem, the mechanism, and the purpose. Now I want to get practical. The research offers some strategies for integration. How do we live with this? And the first piece of advice is blunt.
It is blunt.
Stop explaining yourself.
Yes. The research advises that you must stop trying to translate your depth to people who are committed to the surface. It's a waste of energy.
There's the biblical reference used in the sources. Don't cast pearls before swine. Now that sounds harsh. Are we calling people swine?
It's not an insult to the people. It's a statement about value and compatibility. A pig doesn't know the value of a pearl. It's not the pig's fault. It thinks the pearl is food. It will bite it, realize it's hard, spit it out, and trample it.
And probably get angry at you for feeding it a rock.
Exactly. If you share your deepest, most vulnerable insights, your pearls, with someone who only values surface chit-chat, they won't get it, and you will feel rejected. But it's not rejection, it's a category error. You brought pearls to a place that wanted corn.
That is a great way to put it. You brought pearls to a place that wanted corn. So the advice is to protect your interiority.
Yes. Be selective. The research mentions that once you stop seeking validation from everyone, you become dangerous in a good way. You become a mirror. When you stop trying to please, you reflect people back to themselves, and that's powerful.
And this leads to the second practical point, finding the tribe. Because we aren't saying you should live in a cave forever.
No. Humans need connection, but the outsider needs a specific kind of connection. You may not fit the mass, but you can find your tribe. The research calls this a frequency match.
How do we find them? If we're all hiding behind these masks, how do we find each other?
By stopping the masking. As long as you are pretending to be normal, other outsiders cannot see you. You are signaling the wrong frequency. When you stop masking, when you dare to be a little weird or intense in public, you act like a beacon.
You signal your true frequency.
And that is when other outsiders can find you. Oh, you're listening to that station too. I thought I was the only one.
So the vulnerability of being yourself is actually the homing beacon.
Precisely. You don't need to belong to everyone. You don't need the whole herd. You need a few people who speak your language. And the research has this beautiful line. You don't need to belong to everyone. You need to belong to yourself.
I belong to myself? That's the mantra.
It is. And it changes the energy of the room. When you walk into a room belonging to yourself, you aren't asking the room to validate you. You are there to observe, to contribute if you wish, or to leave. You are free.
I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, the idea of the shadow and something called the golden shadow. We talked about how people project their negativity onto the outsider, but the research also talks about the golden shadow, projecting our positive traits onto others. How does that fit in?
This is often what happens when the outsider feels less than. They look at someone who is charismatic or creative or bold, and they admire them excessively. They put them on a pedestal.
Oh, I could never do that. They're so talented.
Right. Jung would say that you are projecting your own potential onto them. The reason you're so drawn to that outsider character in a movie or a book is because you are that. You just haven't claimed it yet.
I see.
You've relegated your own greatness to the shadow because you were told it was too much.
So reclaiming the golden shadow means owning your intensity, owning your own talent.
It means admitting, yes, I am intense. Yes, I am deep. Yes, I see things others don't. And instead of apologizing for it, you start using it. You start to see it as a resource, not a liability.
The research also brings up a very specific challenge for the modern outsider, the digital world. The sources mention that technology gives us connection without presence. How does social media make this feeling of being an outsider worse?
Oh, it amplifies it 1,000 times. Social media is essentially a curation of the persona. It is the herd on steroids. When you scroll, you are seeing the manual for being human that you never received, presented as if everyone else is following it perfectly.
Everyone is having the perfect brunch.
The perfect brunch, the perfect vacation, the perfect opinion.
And for the person who feels half a second out of sync, that feed looks like empirical proof that they are, in fact, broken.
Exactly. It confirms the bias. Look, everyone else is fitting in. But the research reminds us you are comparing your insides, your doubt, your complexity, your shadow to their polished outsides. It is a fundamentally unfair comparison.
And the medium itself is hostile.
The medium itself is hostile to the message of the outsider. The digital world rewards the quick, the shallow, and the loud. The outsider is often slow, deep, and quiet.
So maybe part of the integration strategy is to curate your digital life as ruthlessly as your social life.
Absolutely. If the feed makes you feel small, turn it off. Go back to the solitude. Go back to the demon.
I want to spend a moment on the concept of wholeness versus happiness. Jung didn't seem too interested in happiness, did he?
No, he was quite skeptical of the pursuit of happiness. He felt that happiness was often just a side effect of ignoring reality.
Ignorance is bliss.
Exactly. Jung's goal was wholeness. And wholeness includes the light and the dark, the success and the failure, the belonging and the isolation. The outsider is often closer to wholeness than the happy conformist because the outsider has been forced to grapple with the dark parts of life.
That's a comforting thought. The struggle isn't a detour from the goal, it is the path to the goal.
The cure for the pain is in the pain. That's a paraphrase of Rumi, but it fits Jung perfectly. You don't solve the feeling of being an outsider by forcing your way inside. You solve it by going deeper into the outside until you realize that the outside is actually the vast creative universe, and the inside was just a small, cramped room.
We've covered so much ground here, from the biological roots of sensitivity to the spiritual mandate of individuation. I want to try to synthesize this for the listener who's maybe driving to work right now or taking a walk and feeling that familiar ache of being different.
Let's look at the arc we've traced. We started with the sensation, the glass wall. We identified the cause, not a defect, but a difference in processing, a frequency gap, and this call to individuation.
Right.
We looked at the mechanics, the heavy persona, the triggering shadow, the demanding daemon, and we looked at the purpose, that nature needs you to be different so that the species doesn't stagnate.
And the cost is isolation, but the reward is a soul that is actually inhabited.
That's it, an inhabited soul. Most people are just renting space in their own lives. They are squatters in their own psyche. The outsider owns the building. It might be a fixer-upper, and it's lonely sometimes. It's yours.
As we wrap up, I want to leave the listener with a final thought from the research. It's about the idea of the cosmic joke. The sources allude to this idea that eventually the outsider realizes that everyone is pretending.
Yes, That is the moment of liberation. When you realize that the manual for being human that you thought everyone else got, it doesn't exist. Everyone is improvising. Everyone is scared. Everyone is wearing a mask.
You were just the one sensitive enough to notice the mask was fake.
So you aren't the one who is lost. You're the one who noticed that nobody has a map.
Exactly. And once you know that nobody has a map, you are free to draw your own.
That is incredibly liberating. It takes all the pressure off. You don't have to catch up because there is no track.
There is no track. There's only your track. Jung's concept of the way, or the Tao, is very personal. It's like a river. It finds its own path to the ocean. You can't force a river to flow in a straight line. The outsider's life is often a winding river. It looked inefficient to the engineering mind of society, but it is the only way the water gets to where it needs to go.
I love that. A winding river.
And remember, the research emphasizes this journey is lifelong. You don't solve individuation on a Tuesday. It is a spiral. You come back to the same issues, but from a higher perspective. The feeling of being an outsider might never fully go away.
But it changes.
It changes from a sharp pain into a quiet companion. It becomes a reminder of your autonomy.
It becomes a signal. I feel like an outsider here. That means I'm keeping my own counsel. That means I am alert.
Yes. It becomes a superpower. You can enter any room, assess the dynamics, understand the hidden agendas, and stay safe. Because you aren't desperate to merge, you are the observer, and the observer holds the power.
This has been a truly illuminating deep dive. I feel like we've taken a feeling that is usually a source of shame and turned it into a badge of honor.
That is the power of Jung. He redeems the parts of us that we want to throw away. He tells us, no, keep that. That's the gold.
So, to summarize our key takeaways for today. First, the feeling of difference is not a mistake. It is the call to individuation. It is your psyche trying to separate from the herd to become a whole person.
Second, it is not a flaw. It is a vocation. It is a demon that must be obeyed, or you risk neurosis.
Third, the pain of isolation is the price of admission. It is the training ground for developing a personality that can stand against the god of terror, the unknown.
And finally, the world needs people who can see through the glass of convention. We need the scouts. We need the observers.
And remember the practical. Stop casting pearls before swine. Protect your energy. Embrace solitude as a sanctuary, not a punishment. And trust that in the second half of life, the wine will clear.
That brings us to the end of this deep dive. But I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. We talked about finding your tribe. But what if the ultimate goal isn't even finding the tribe? What if the goal is to reach a place where you are so comfortable in your own skin, so aligned with your own demon, that you could walk through the world completely alone and still feel entirely at home? What if home isn't a place or a group, but a frequency you carry with you?
That is the ultimate freedom. I carry my home within me.
I carry my home within me.
I think that's a beautiful place to end. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the outsider's mind. We hope it brought you some inner clarity. If this resonated with you, if you felt seen today, then you are exactly where you are supposed to be.
Indeed.
Join us at Topikia Inner Clarity for the next deep dive. Until then, remember, I belong to myself.
I belong to myself.
Take care, everyone.